One quiet weekend by a Michigan lake began as a simple favor to a friend, then swerved into a life I never expected. His invitation felt ordinary. His family cabin felt safe. But the moment his father opened the door, my pulse changed, and everything shifted. For good and forever. If this story touches you, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps gentle stories reach hearts and homes everywhere. I'm going to tell this with the kind of steady voice I use at work, because that's how I learn to trust moments that make your pulse spike and your lungs tighten. I'm a physician assistant in cardiology, the kind of person who keeps a calm hand on a shoulder while explaining what a normal rhythm feels like. The kind of friend who will pack extra water and an extra sweater just in case. I never expected any of that steadying instinct would be tested by a weekend invitation. A cedar cabin, and my friend's father standing in a doorway with a pot of chili and a gaze that seemed to hold a sunrise. Tyler is a good man. We met in Seattle when I took a temporary assignment there. Two Michigan kids who migrated west and ended up comparing notes about the best lakes back home and the worst coffee we'd ever drank on call. He's the kind of friend who texts when you're quiet too long, who shows up with ginger ale when you say you're fine, who knows how to give you a minute and then sits with you anyway. We never dated, never even drifted in that direction. We joked that we were brothers of different mothers, bonded by Midwest humor and a love of old wood boats. I'm 33. He's 34. We are grown, if not always wise. We keep our promises. So when he said, "Come back with me to my dad's cabin, Walloon Lake, Northern Michigan, long weekend, we'll fish, nap, forget email," I said yes, like it was the easiest prescription I'd ever written. In my head, I planned a quiet, restorative few days with my friend. Coffee on a dock, maybe a canoe at dawn, some silence that felt like medicine. I did not know what it would mean for a man I had never met, his father, to open the door to that cabin and see me in a way that made the air feel new. We flew into Traverse City, rented a car that smelled faintly of pine cleaner, and drove up through Petoskey until the road narrowed and the trees gathered close. The way to the Grants' cabin wound past a church with a white steeple and a small store that sold night crawlers and local honey. It felt like stepping into a map we used to draw in school. Neat lines and clear lakes, little blue triangles for pine trees. My early life was West Michigan and then med school in Chicago, but Northern Michigan always felt like a quiet answer. I guess I didn't realize I was going to get an entirely different answer, one that would change how I understood family and time. "Dad made chili," Tyler said, smiling like a boy and not a grown man with a mortgage. "He always makes chili when someone arrives. Says it settles the road out of you." "Smart," I said. "A warm bowl does reset the body. Like telling your nervous system it can go off high alert." "Listen to you, Dr. Calm," he teased, patting my shoulder as we turned toward a gravel drive. "Don't diagnose my dad's soup. Can we call it therapy?" I asked, and we laughed. The cabin was bigger than I pictured and simpler, which I loved. A deep porch, 2 rocking chairs. The American flag hung quiet in the still June air. You could smell the lake before you could see it. A soft, clean scent, like cool linen. The trees here make their own wall, and I swear you can hear their breath if you stand still enough. There was a moment when we parked and just sat. The way you sit in a car after a long drive because the world outside feels too vast in the first second you return to it. Then the front door opened. "Ty!" the man called in that warm voice fathers use for their kids, no matter how grown they are. "You made it." He stepped out onto the porch, and I noticed the kind of details I always notice without trying. His hands were broad and strong, veins like little rivers, the hands of a doctor or a carpenter. Lines at the corners of his eyes, not from frowning, but from a lifetime of laughing or squinting into sunlight on this porch. He wore a navy sweater even though it was summer, the kind of sweater that looks mended and beloved. Silver in his hair, but not much. The rest still a steady brown. He stood straight, not to be proud, but to be ready for a hug. "This is Michael," Tyler said, and I blinked. Of course he had a name. Of course the dad we had mentioned often had a person inside those mentions. But hearing "this is Michael" instead of "this is my dad" made the introduction feel level. Human to human, not just roles. "Welcome," Michael said. And the way he said it, slow and genuine, felt like the steam of the chili was already unfurling through the house. "You must be Evan. I'm glad you're here." "Long flight? Come in and warm up?" He had the voice of a man who had made 1,000 introductions easier for nervous people, the tone we strive for in clinic when someone's eyes are shiny and their hands are cold. His eyes were a gentle hazel, and for a beat my job-trained brain thought, this man knows how to keep watch. And then a different part of my mind, the part that notices the way light threads through the edge of a face in a doorway, said, "Careful." Hard inside smelled like cedar, cumin, and the kind of clean you get from opening windows. There was a mug on the counter with a faint ring. He'd been waiting, listening for tires on gravel, sipping and pacing. The kitchen was simple. A big wooden table, a bowl of apples, a ceramic pitcher with wildflowers that could only have been picked from the ditch alongside the lane. The chili simmered in a Dutch oven, the kind that lasts longer than arguments. I felt out of place for a second, like the grip of a dream where you know you're not supposed to be somewhere, and yet everything in the scene is kind. "You still using coriander?" Tyler asked, lifting the lid. "Of course," Michael said, smiling. "Don't knock the coriander philosophy. It lightens the heaviness," I laughed. "I say the same thing in a different language," I said, and Michael turned to me. "You're the cardiology PA," he said, nodding. "Ty talks about you, says you talk scared hearts down from fences." "Thank you for that. The world needs it." I felt my face warm. "I do my best," I said. "He didn't tell me you cooked like this." "He leaves out the boring parts," Michael said. "Come, wash up." "Eat first, settle later." We filled bowls and sat. And if the world has a way of telling you to slow down, it is a spoon through a bowl of something you didn't make, in a place where nobody expects anything of you yet. We talked about unimportant things first. The weird turbulence near Madison, the cost of rentals, the miracle of finding a parking spot in summer near the dock. It is a kind of ritual, this peeling back of conversation, like unwrapping something fragile. Michael asked questions that made me feel seen, not interrogated. He listened to my answers like he was standing on a dock inside them, steady. At some point, Tyler started telling a story about the time we tried to grill salmon on his apartment balcony and set off the building alarm. And Michael laughed so hard he had to take his glasses off and wipe his eyes. It's a warm thing, making a person's father laugh. It feels like you passed a small test you weren't aware of. It should be noted, so you hear the whole heart of this, that I wasn't looking. I wasn't scanning rooms for men I might love. I had dated a little over the last few years, but kept my heart tucked under my work and my friends, grateful for steady companionship and cautious when it came to the kind of feelings that can sweep you. I had come to the lake to rest. And yet, from the first night, I felt something simple and undeniable. I liked the way Michael moved through the world. I liked his pace. I liked the way he asked if I wanted more water and then, without making a fuss, set the pitcher within my reach. It was nothing, and it was everything. In medicine, we call it bedside manner. In life, I think we call it care. The first morning, I woke early. The light at 5:30 in June in northern Michigan is like water poured through linen, soft and sure. I made coffee quietly, trying not to wake anyone, and stepped out onto the dock barefoot. The boards were damp and cool. A loon called across the lake, and the sound went straight through me, that lonely flute. I sat and breathed in time with the slight shift of water under the dock. Inhale when it lifted, exhale when it fell. It felt like good medicine. "Good morning," Michael said, his voice soft enough to respect the birds. He had a cardigan on and carried his own mug. He didn't ask permission to sit. He paused and waited for the yes in my shoulders. I nodded, and he lowered himself onto the dock with a sigh that sounded thankful. "Sleep okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said, then smiled. "Better than I have in months." "That's what the lake does," he said. "It holds you while you remember you're safe." We watched the mist rise and the sun pull the green out of the trees like a painter bringing out a color from the back of the palette. For a while we didn't speak, and it wasn't awkward. The silence had shape. "I used to take Tyler out here when he couldn't settle," Michael said quietly. "Little boy worries are still worries. We would count breaths with the little lapping waves, just like you're doing. You can train a body back to calm. It takes time, but it comes back." I turned to look at him. "You're a physician," I said. It wasn't a question. I could hear it in the way he described care. Family medicine, he said. Retired from full-time last year, kept a few patients I couldn't let go. They won't let me, really. I'm trying to learn how to use the word no and failing most days. How about you? Tyler says cardiology. Advanced heart failure mostly, I said. A lot of teaching, a lot of listening. My patients are brave. So are their families. Sometimes I think the most important thing I do is say the thing everyone is too afraid to say, and then promise to stay after I've said it. Michael's eyes softened, and he nodded. That's the job, he said. You say the true hard thing and you don't leave the room. We sat with that for a while. He told me about the time he misdiagnosed a rash and how it still keeps him humble. I told him about the patient who taught me how to slow down when I'm tired by humming Take 5 under my breath. He showed me a trick for getting a splinter out with baking soda I had never seen work so well. It felt like two people comparing notes from different wings of the same hospital in a very different building, the long, low clinic of this lake. Tyler joined us later, hair sticking up, voice sleepy. Coffee? He mumbled, and Michael passed him a mug without looking away from the light on the water, instincts born of years. We fished that morning, if you can call what we did fishing. Tyler yapped at the fish, and they declined our invitations. Michael coached me gently on the cast, not like a teacher who demands, but like a friend who wants you to get to know a good thing. When I got the line caught on a low branch, he shook his head and smiled. The trees want to fish too, he said. They have their dreams. Back at the cabin, we made sandwiches, the kind with too much mustard and potato chips shoved in the middle. Michael put a hand on my shoulder as he reached past me for a plate. It was nothing. It was everything. My body kept the record even though my brain was trying to be careful. In the afternoon, it rained, a sudden darkening, and then the sound like someone shaking a paper bag full of rice over the roof. Tyler took a nap. His long week finally claimed him. Michael asked if I wanted to see the boathouse. It was a short walk down a narrow path lined with ferns. Inside, it smelled like rope and engine oil and old wood. There was a wooden boat under a canvas tarp, half sanded, the bow like a sleeping bird's beak. She was my father's boat, Michael said, lifting the edge of the canvas like he was checking on a child. I've been meaning to finish her. Every year I promise, and every year something distracts me. Maybe this is the year. She's beautiful, I said, and he smiled. Do you know how to sand? He asked. I'm highly trainable, I said. Good, he said, reaching for a sanding block. He showed me the grain and the pace, slow and consistent, not pressing too hard. We worked side by side quietly, dust floating like a light fog inside the boathouse. He told me about his father, who taught him to listen to birds. I told him about my grandfather, who taught me to tie knots and left me his pocket knife with a blade so dull it was safe for a baby. Our shoulders brushed sometimes as we reached and shifted. Each time, a small electric thing flickered and then quieted. He would step back and say, "That's good," and it sounded like a blessing. When we took a break, he poured lemonade into 2 old glasses and handed me one like a ceremony. We stood in the doorway and watched the rain fall straight down. I came out late, he said suddenly, not looking at me. He said it the way a doctor does when he knows a good dose of truth is better than another topical ointment. In my 50s. I was sure of it long before, then unsure, then sure again, and then I listened to what the still parts of me were saying and stopped arguing. I took a slow breath. I'm glad you listened, I said quietly. That's hard work, he nodded. Tyler's been kind, he said. It has taken work. I didn't tell him to hurt him. I told him because I wanted to stay in my own life. He looked down at his hands. It's a relief to say it to someone new and not have it be a crisis. I'm gay, I said, simple as taking a pulse. The air stayed steady. He nodded and I nodded, 2 charts updated. We didn't say anything after that for a while. The rain did the talking. I didn't feel hunted, and I didn't feel weird. I felt like a person in a boathouse with another person, sanding and telling the truth. The lake had a way of holding secrets kindly until you learned they weren't secrets anymore. They were alive. That night, after a dinner of grilled corn and blackened fish and the softest baked potatoes I've ever eaten, Tyler went to bed early, worn out in the way a person sleeps when the place is a childhood home. Michael and I stayed by the fire he had built in the stone hearth, even though it wasn't cold, the flames more company than heat. We talked about books. He liked Wendell Berry and Mary Oliver. I offered a line from Ada Limon that made him close his eyes and nod. He told me how he teaches medical students to introduce themselves, to say their name slowly, to sit if the patient is sitting, to ask, "What's the part you're most afraid of me missing?" I told him how I teach new PAs to never put their hand on a door handle until they are done knowing the person in the room. I said that in the clinic you can feel the handles like magnets, and the magnet means you're scared. He laughed softly and said, "You've read a lot of rooms." We were two men who had read a lot of rooms, sitting in a room with a fire and a history of how to care who we were. At some point, the clock on the mantel chimed, and we both stood as if it had asked us to. He held out the quilt that lived over the back of the couch and said, "Are you warm enough?" He held the quilt like a question and also an answer. "I'm warm," I said, even though a part of me was trembling in a new way. At the door to the hallway, he paused. I paused too. "Good night, Evan," he said. There was a careful distance in our names that felt like a promise to be good men. "Good night, Michael," I said, and the way his name felt in my mouth made a quiet engine start somewhere in me that I had always kept turned off to save fuel. I did not sleep for a while, not because I was afraid, but because I felt awake in a completely new and wholly gentle way. The morning brought the kind of blue that makes you forget there are clouds. Tyler wanted to rent bikes and ride the path into town, eat pastries, and talk about the time he almost joined a traveling band. It felt easy. Michael joined us at first, then turned back halfway, saying he needed to call a patient who had just started a new med and might be nervous. 2 miles back," he said, tapping his thigh. "This knee reminds me I'm mortal." When we got to town, Tyler bought pastries and a ridiculous hat. We sat on a bench by the bay and watched a little girl feed a chipmunk, both parties amazed. It was while he was telling me about a new job he was considering that he said it, casual, like he was asking me to pass napkins. "So," he said, "you and my dad talk like you've been friends a long time." I kept my face steady. "He's easy to talk to," I said. "You're lucky." "I know," he said, then squinted at the water. "And I'm not blind." "Are you—" He paused and smiled. "Is there something I should know?" I took a breath and reminded my body that it had plenty of air. "I don't want to hide from you," I said, slow and honest. "We didn't plan anything. We haven't done anything we would be ashamed to tell you. He told me he came out in his 50s. I told him I'm gay. That's all. It feels easy to be around him. And I want to be careful. I'm your friend first." Tyler looked at me for a long beat, then shook his head slowly and laughed softly. "If you were anyone else," he said. "If he were anyone else. If this were a different story with a different person." He put his elbow on his knee and his chin in his hand like a kid in a classroom. "I want my dad to be happy. I want you to be happy. I also don't want to feel like I'm going to be the last to know a thing happening in my own family." "I won't do that to you," I said. "I promise. If anything changes, you'll know before it feels secret." He looked down at his hands and then up at me again. "He deserves love," he said, his voice soft. He gave it to us like it was breath. He stayed in rooms. He stayed at football games. He stayed through my worst year. I had to catch up. It took me a minute when he told me he's gay, but I'm caught up now. I want him not to be alone, so he feels free to read books out loud to someone when he wants to. He smiled. "And you deserve someone who can make your brain quiet because you're loud in there." I laughed. "I am," I admitted. "It's a firehouse sometimes." He nudged my shoulder with his. "Just talk to me. That's the only rule." When we got back, we found Michael on the porch, pen behind his ear, reading a mystery with a dog-eared page. He looked up and squinted at our pastries. "Traitors," he said, and we laughed and handed him a cinnamon twist. That afternoon, a gusty wind took the calm out of the lake. We stayed on the porch playing a game with cards and pennies. Michael loved games that had no stakes and deeply mattered, the ones where keeping score became a conversation about what counted. He was funnier than I expected. Dry, almost sly, a humor you only catch if you're listening. Tyler rolled his eyes at our jokes and added one of his own. We were, in the simplest description, 3 people enjoying an ordinary day. If love is a set of ordinary days that somehow add up to something sacred, then maybe that was the first one. In the evening, I helped Michael chop vegetables for a salad. The kitchen window framed the lake the way a kind photographer frames a good face. He handed me a red pepper, and our fingers brushed. We both stilled for half a second. I could feel his breath change, not faster, just different. He adjusted the bowl on the counter and then looked at me. Steady. "Can we name the thing?" he said in a careful tone. "So it can stop being a shadow and be a real object we can decide what to do with?" The language made me almost smile. Doctor talk, precise and kind. "We can," I said. "I think there is something here, Michael." It surprised me. "I like you. I like talking to you. It's not just chatter for me, but I respect Tyler. And I respect you. I don't want a story where anyone gets hurt. I want to go slow. I want to go slow," he said, nodding. "I also don't want to pretend I don't feel it." I told myself coming out was about telling the truth even when it was late. I don't want to make a habit of being late. I felt a laugh shake loose in my chest, a good one, the relief kind. "I talked with Tyler," I said. "He is a wonder. He wants you to be happy. He told me to talk to him if anything changes." Michael closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they were bright. "I don't deserve that kid," he said softly. "You do," I said. "You made him." We didn't kiss then, though there was a gravity between us that could have pulled us together like two boats in the same slip. We set the salad on the table with two careful hands and ate as if eating were a way to keep promises. The next day, we took the wooden canoe out. It held us steady. Tyler sat in the back and cried, "Captain!" every time someone else paddled. At a bend in the lake, we saw two deer on the shore drinking, then lifting their heads and turning together toward a sound we couldn't hear. Michael told me the name of a bird I had only ever described as gray with a little black cap. We drifted in a shallow cove and let the canoe idle while the water made small tapping sounds against the hull. The air smelled like damp stone and sunlight on wood. "Do you ever think about moving back?" Michael asked me, voice casual. "I think about it more lately," I said, telling the truth. Seattle was a good challenge. It helped me grow. But my parents are aging the way parents do. Michigan feels like a language I still speak without trying. It feels like something I could come home to. He nodded. "That's how I feel about this place," he said, looking around the cove like he was introducing me to a person. "Not as an escape, but as the thing I belong to. I like the quiet work of belonging. It's different than hiding." I looked at him, at the way his hand rested on the paddle, loose, confident. "I like the quiet work of belonging," I repeated. "I don't know if I've ever known that in this way." We drifted a while longer and then paddled home. When the sun was an orange coin on the far side of the lake, Tyler stood and declared, "I'm making s'mores like an adult," and proceeded to manufacture the most ridiculous tower of chocolate and char. He got marshmallow on his cheek, and Michael wiped it with his sleeve like it was 25 years ago. I stood and watched and thought, this is what it looks like when care lasts. This is what it looks like when a man stays. That night, after Tyler went inside to call an old friend who had recently had a baby, Michael and I found ourselves alone on the porch. The lake was a deep blue-black, the sky a net of stars. Our chairs were close, not touching. He had a blanket over his knees, and I had my hands tucked into my sleeves. Crickets sang a busy song. A far-off boat chugged like an old man clearing his throat. "May I say something?" Michael asked quietly. "Without requiring anything from you?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I like you," he said simply. "I like how you think. I like how you listen. I like how quiet you are with other people's fear. I like the way you hold a cup with both hands when you care about what someone is saying. I like how you made Tyler laugh the way he laughed when he was 8. I have not felt this awake in a way that feels like it might be safe in a long time. I want to be decent. I want to be gentle. I also want not to pretend I am not standing on a porch trying not to think about the way your voice sounds when you say my name." He had said more than a few words, but none of them landed heavy. They landed like leaves. I took a slow breath. "I like you too," I said. "It scares me in a way that feels honest. My life has been built carefully. My heart has been steady. I'm grateful for that. But this feels like a rhythm I want to learn. I don't know what to do with the fact that you're Tyler's father, except to say that it matters and I will treat it with the caution it deserves. And I want to go slow, slow, he agreed, that little smile again. We sat in the quiet for a while, feeling the new shape of this small, brave truth. Then he turned his hand, palm up on the arm of his chair, not reaching. I set my fingers against his, a quiet bridge, not a grab. We stayed like that, not moving, breathing like we were counting waves. When the porch light flicked as a signal from inside that Tyler had found yet another reason to be silly, we let our hands separate. The world had not fallen. The lake remained. On our last morning, the sky was overcast but bright like a pearl. We packed bags slowly, the way you pack when you are not ready to go. Tyler and I loaded the car while Michael fussed with the plants by the kitchen window. When it came time for goodbyes, we hugged in the doorway, the three of us, a cluster of arms and gentle claps on backs. Then Tyler slipped down the steps to check the trunk and give us a minute without naming it. "Take care," Michael said, his hands on my arms, steady. "And call me." "As a friend, if nothing else. Or write a letter. Letters are kind." "I will," I said, and I meant it. "Take care." He smiled, then leaned in and pressed his forehead to mine for the length of a breath. It was nearly nothing. It was the most honest thing anyone had done with me in years. I closed my eyes and let the calm of it flood me like a slow, warm river. He stepped back, and the light on his face was one I knew I would carry, even if I never saw it again. The drive back felt like the body after an IV line is removed, tender, aware, missing something, but also relieved to be intact. Tyler talked about work and then about his parents' divorce, which had been gentle as divorces go, the way a bone breaks in a clean line when the cut is sharp and the reduction careful. He told me that he had once told his dad he could be himself, but he hadn't realized what it would look like. "I said it before I understood it," he said. "But I'm glad I said it." I nodded, then said, "He's a good man." "He is," Tyler said. "And you're a good one, too." "Call him." I did. The next day. We started with little things. "How are the tomatoes? Did you finish the chapter? How is your patient on the new med?" And before long, we were talking about more. He told me about the empty spaces in the house after Tyler left for college, the way the air changed inside. I told him about my grandmother's recipe for chicken and dumplings that is not a recipe at all, but a story. He mailed me a book with a note in his careful hand. "For your nightstand. For the nights you want a calm paragraph to settle into sleep." I began to understand that what drew me wasn't just him. It was the way he attended to what was in front of him. He watered plants and spoke kindly to them. He kept extra toothbrushes under the sink, knowing people forget. He had a small box of repaired things, a watch that ticked now, a lamp that glowed like a small moon again. He had patience. He had weathered. It was not an accident that he felt steady. It was a practice. A month later, I went back to the cabin on a weekend Tyler wasn't there. Not because we wanted to keep someone out, but because he was traveling and we had been careful. We had told him, every step, what we were doing. He asked for one thing. "Tell me if you're going to call it dating." I don't want to be surprised by a label. "We're not there yet," Michael said on the phone. "But we're coming to it honestly." Tyler said he loved us both and then hung up to give us space. I sat on my bed with the phone in my hand and felt like a person who had somehow found himself in a story without villains. Just three people trying to be decent inside newness. The second weekend felt different and the same. The lake was the same. The coffee tasted the same. The creak of the floor near the pantry was a familiar complaint, but we were different. The edges of our caution were still intact, but the middle felt warmer. We cooked together, we sanded the boat in the boathouse, we read pages of poems out loud and laughed when the rhythm felt corny. At night, we sat on the couch under the quilt and watched a baseball game with the sound turned low and our hands quiet between us, touching in a way that felt respectful and new. The first time we kissed, it was early afternoon and it was raining again. We had argued gently about how much lemon to use in the dressing, and he had made a face at me and then smiled. I had laughed, and the laugh stuck in my throat like a too big bite of truth. He reached out, touched my cheek with that doctor's hand, careful like he was checking my temperature, and then leaned in and kissed me. It was not wild. It was not demanding. It was firm and sure, and then it was gone. And he was looking at me like he had asked a question with his mouth and was willing to accept whatever answer I gave. "Yes," I said, my voice a little ragged. "I want that." We kissed again, the kind of kiss that is a commitment to a pace as much as to a person. We did not rush. I will spare you the details, not because they aren't dear to me, but because I want to protect the quiet of that room and the sweetness of that afternoon. It is enough to say that my heart, which I am trained to watch with detachment, beat strong and certain like it was exercising after. We sat at the table and cut up tomatoes like people who had just opened a door and were having a glass of water in the new room. "We need to talk to Tyler," I said, and he nodded. We called him that evening, and he answered with his face already worried and not worried. "I know something is happening," he said without preamble. "Are we good?" "We are trying to be good," Michael said. "We like each other. We are going slow. We don't want to hurt you." Tyler closed his eyes and then opened them. "I am okay," he said. "I will be okay. I need a minute, and I will be okay." He laughed and then shook his head. "If you are going to cook together, at least send me pictures of the food. And maybe don't kiss on my childhood couch for a while. We promised. We meant it." We sent him a picture of the salad and another of the lake and one of the boathouse boat, half sanded into the future. Over the next months, we found a rhythm that felt like the healthy kind. Time together at the cabin, time apart with calls that didn't demand anything. Small things done for each other with quiet hands. I moved back to Michigan that fall, partly for my parents, partly for me, wholly because it felt like time. I didn't move into the cabin. I rented a little place in town and hung a map of Lake Michigan over the kitchen table. Michael came over with a toolbox and fixed a window that wouldn't close right. And we ate grilled cheese like two teenagers who were pretending they didn't know how old they were. I liked the way he lived in my space. Respectful, curious, not trying to rearrange anything. He liked the way I remembered what he had said 3 conversations earlier. We discovered we had the same favorite brand of sharp cheddar and the same complaint about too many pillows. We visited my parents and sat on their porch, and my mother whispered to me in the kitchen, "He's a strong reader of people. Be kind." I kissed her cheek and said I would. There were moments that weren't easy. There are always moments. In the grocery store, a woman from Michael's old clinic saw us, put a hand on his arm, and said loudly, "Well, isn't this modern?" He was polite, and then we walked to the aisle with the pickles, and he put his hand on the cart like he was holding on to the edge of a drift. I touched his elbow and said, "Want to leave?" He shook his head. "No," he said. "I want to buy pickles. Another time?" We ran into one of Tyler's college friends, a man who had now grown into the soft, sweet weight of a new father, and he blinked and then said, "Huh," and then hugged us both. "Okay," he said. "I'm going to have questions later. Right now, I just think you both look good." It felt like someone had opened a window. We breathed easier. We had a conversation about the future one chilly night in November. Sitting by the wood stove at the cabin with wool socks and tea that had cooled to that perfect temperature where you can drink it without thinking. "What do we call this?" Michael asked gently. "What do we want it to be in the light of day?" "I think we can call it love," I said, a little surprised to hear the word out loud like a bird in a house. It flapped for a second and then found a place to rest. I don't want to rush into the logistics because I don't want to break the quiet good thing by making it carry too much. But I know what it feels like to not sleep because I want to hear your voice. And I know what it feels like to be less afraid when you are in the room. That is love to me, and I can say it. He nodded, eyes bright and calm. "I love you," he said, and it wasn't dramatic. It was like he had just reached out and placed a warm hand on the back of my neck. His tone was the tone he used with patients when he was giving them good news and didn't want to scare them with joy. "I do. I am grateful. I am surprised. I am steady," we told Tyler the next day. We called him and sat close on the couch so he could see we were next to each other and not hiding. "We are calling it love," Michael said, a small smile. Tyler closed his eyes and then opened them slowly. He nodded. "Okay," he said. "Okay, thank you for telling me now. I need a second, but I will catch up. I am happy you are both happy. If you need me to yell at anyone for being dumb, I will." If you need space from me, I'll give it. If you need leftovers, I have so many. His voice shook a little, and I felt my own eyes sting. We need you, Michael said quietly, just as you are. Winter settled and made its own rules about how fast we could go anywhere. Snow, like Grace, covered the messy tracks and gave everything a clean look. We built fires and cooked soups. We found a way to move around each other in the kitchen like dancers. We went to the hardware store and stood in the aisle with screws and laughed because we are both the kind of men who squint at small labels for too long. We watched old movies and played cards like adolescents. We learned which parts of our lives were old and which were new, and we were gentle with both. With spring came the color back in the world. We finished sanding the boat together, then varnished it until the wood looked like it was lit from within. We pushed it into the lake one morning in May, and it held us without complaint. We rowed out to the middle, then let ourselves drift. At one point, Michael reached over and put his hand on the bow, just to feel the wood, and I reached out and did the same, our fingers touching on the boat we had made right together. It felt like a marriage of effort, which feels like the heaviest kind of love to me. In summer, my parents came up for a day. My father, a quiet man who needed a minute to get used to the idea of Michael at first, stood with him in the boathouse and admired the rails. "Good work," he said. Michael smiled. Later, my mother sat with him on the dock and asked after his patience. He told her about one man who had brought him tomatoes in January as thanks, an impossible kindness made possible by the stubbornness of greenhouses. My mother laughed and patted his hand. "You get what you give," she said. We had dinner out there at a little place where the special is always something fried and the waitress calls everyone honey without condescension. We walked back along the road and stopped because the light through the birches looked like it was telling a story we didn't want to interrupt. We listened to the leaves and we breathed and we let our shoulders touch. If someone had told me then that a casual invitation could translate into a long, steady, faithful love, I would have laughed. Not because I didn't believe in love, but because I didn't understand how the right person can make time feel like a place. Michael did that. He made time feel like a place I could live. There were moments of grief, too. Love doesn't erase them. It gives them one more hand to hold. A former patient of his died, and he drove to the funeral alone because he thought it would be easier. I waited at the cabin, made soup, folded a quiet stack of towels, then walked the shore until I saw his car. He got out, and he looked 10 years older in the way you look when you have been to the end of a story. I put my hand behind his neck and told him, "You stayed in the room?" And he nodded and cried. The way good men cry when their private care meets public loss. Another time, Tyler came up with a new friend, a man with bright eyes and a jazz record collection. We all sat around the table and told the truth about how strange and good it was. Tyler watched us for a while and then said, "I wasn't sure I could do this." And Michael said, "Me either." And then we laughed and cut the pie and passed it around, and everyone ended up with a wedge that was a little too big and exactly right. On an autumn afternoon, we took the boat across the lake and tied up near a little cove we had never explored. The leaves were doing their last act, showy and sure. We brought a thermos and 2 cups and a blanket and sat on a rock warmed by the weak sun. I told Michael the story of my first crush in high school, a boy with a gentle way and a laugh that shook me, and how I had folded that feeling into schoolwork because I didn't know what else to do. He told me about the man in his residency who had walked with him to the cafeteria and made him feel like the world could be wider. We were men who had taken the long road, and we honored that. We didn't waste time regretting the miles. We laid them out like postcards and admired what they had taught us. The way postcards carry both the image and the handwriting, picture and care. We married last May. It was small. Tyler stood next to us. My parents cried. We held hands and read a poem that talked about bread, good bread, and the way you keep making it even when your kitchen is too small. We promised to stay in the room when the rooms got hard. We promised to say the whispered truth, not the loud lie. We promised to go slow even when fast felt easier. We kissed like people who had practiced being careful and were now free to be sure. We live in a rhythm now that feels healthy, like a resting pulse that can pick up and slow down without distress. We split time between my place in town and the cabin. We nurse tomatoes through cool nights and give away the ones that won't fit on our sandwiches. We read to each other sometimes, just a page, just enough to settle us. I keep a travel mug in his car now. He keeps an extra sweater in mine. He leaves notes on my kitchen counter that say things like, "There's leftover soup. Remember to eat, and I am proud of you." Every now and then, we pull out the boat and sand a plank just to keep our hands busy together. We talk about what it means to be tender in a world that likes to pretend tenderness is expensive. We go to the clinic when he's asked to consult, and I watch him walk down the hall to see a nervous patient, and I think, I am in love with a man who knows where to put his hands and where to put his words. It is a privilege to know him. It is a gift to be known by him. When new people ask us how we met, we have a choice to make. Sometimes we say, at a cabin on Walloon Lake, and let them picture whatever they want. Sometimes we say, my friend invited me to his cabin, and his dad changed everything, and watch their eyebrows climb, then watch them soften when they see the calm in our faces. We tell the truth and the quiet with equal skill. We are doctors of different kinds and men of the same kind. We make soup, we make beds, we make time. If there is anything I want someone listening to carry with them, it is this. Your heart is not on a timer. It is an organ, yes, with a rhythm and a job, but it is also a room that can be rearranged long after you think the furniture is set. If a door opens and the person on the other side stands with a warm bowl and a kind face and says, "Welcome," you are allowed to walk in. You are allowed to say, "I was not expecting this." You are allowed to go slow. You are allowed to set your hand on the table and let another hand rest near it, not needing to clutch. You are allowed to be happy, even if it comes to you in a way the brochure didn't describe. On nights when the wind comes off the lake and shakes the shutters a little, we sit close and listen. Sometimes I can feel my heart in my throat, and I remember the first time mine changed its pace at that doorway. I remember the chili and the coriander, the way spices can lighten the heaviness. I remember sanding the boat and bringing the grain out with patience. I remember the first kiss that felt like a question asked in a language we both knew and hadn't used. I remember Tyler's face on the screen, his nod, his brave acceptance. I remember my mother's hand on Michael's and my father's quiet, "Good work." I remember all of it, and I breathe like the lake taught me to breathe. We have a life now, one that fits into an ordinary day. The kettle whistles. The floor creaks. A text pings from Tyler with a picture of a ridiculous hat he has found in a shop in some airport, and Michael sends a heart emoji that is extremely dorky and exactly right. We plan a trip to see friends. We reschedule when a patient calls. We pick up milk. We sweep the porch. It is not glamorous, and it is better than glamorous. It is steady. It is kind. It is the kind of love that lets the body unclench. When people ask me what changed everything, I say, a father's welcome, a friend's trust, a lake, a small kitchen, a gentle hand on a shoulder, a room where the truth could speak without yelling. I say, it was like the first time you hear a heart murmur and know it is not a danger but a difference. You listen, you watch, you adjust, you live. And then I smile and add, also, coriander in the chili. Don't forget that. It lightens the heaviness. This is my life now. This is our life. The canoe is varnished. The porch chairs are painted a cheerful blue. A small brass bell hangs by the door to call people in from the dock when dinner is ready. Sometimes the wind rings it for no reason at all, and we lift our heads and smile. We'll be at the table. 2 men with silver and brown hair, one with a pen behind his ear, one with a map above the stove, talking about the day. We'll pause. We'll breathe. We'll look at each other, still a little surprised, deeply grateful, patient with the world. And then we'll eat, and it will be ordinary, and it will be everything.